Monday morning. It is a gorgeous Monday morning here in Maryland, and I have had the best weekend. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in just a minute. We are ASMM Digital Small Business Connection, and we are the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Our goal each and every week, each and every episode is to give you something you can walk away with and put to work in your business or your life. And your life, if you're an entrepreneur, your life is your business. It's the same thing. They go together. So that's part of our story today. But I'm going to talk to you. I usually say that we only have one sponsor. We have ASMM Digital. That's our sponsor. So today we don't have a sponsor. We have a cause. And I want to talk to you about burgersandbands.org. I want to talk to you about that because that is my baby. That is my charity. That is where my purpose in life comes. We are going to stop suicide. That's what we're going to do. And we're doing that through Burgers and Bands, believe it or not. So we have an event coming up. I would really like you to follow us. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram or Twitter. And it's just Burgers and Bands. So Instagram/Burgers and Bands or Twitter /Burgers and B, because somebody has our Burgers and Bands. But there's a lot of ways you can follow us. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, we're everywhere. We really want you to follow us because we have a virtual event coming up, which is why I said I had a really great weekend. Yesterday, we filmed, I think, a total of 10 bands between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. And it was amazing. And to support the people who came out and brought the bands, the people who helped set it up, the people who were filming, my whole crew was there filming, and it was just so touching. I spent half the day crying because, I'm a hormonal mess most of the time. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. So I hope you guys will follow along. It really is a great cause, and it really is a lot of fun. This event that's coming up is a virtual concert. It'll be a 2-day event, virtual concert, both acoustic and I guess electric is what we'd call it. We had a lot of rock and roll bands yesterday, so it was a lot of fun. So want to remind you, I'm going to scroll it across the bottom. You can subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, or if you're watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe on YouTube, and that will help me not be such a nerd with my kids because I haven't hit 1,000 subscribers there yet. So help me out, folks. We are on episode 86, and we're going to talk today about your health. And you're going to have an expert here talking to you about your health. So I want to remind you, we're streaming live. That means you can ask questions. You can ask questions of our guest, who's Janis Isaman from My Body Couture. Janis, let me bring you on screen. There you go. Hi, Janis.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. I have all these housekeeping things that I'm always like, let me zoom through these real quick.
That's perfect.
So you're very patient for hanging around. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you've built this.
Great. So I help people primarily feel better in their bodies. And I broadly fit under the category of fitness, but the way that I execute that is very, very different. So most of my clients come to see me, and I do primarily one-to-one work, although I have expanded into some group options and opportunities. But what usually pulls the trigger for people is pain. So their bodies don't feel great. They might have a pain in their neck, in their low back, in their shoulders, in their hips, in their knees, in their ankles, things like that. So at a certain age, pretty much everybody can relate to this. And what I help people do is find sustainable movement plans and nutrition plans to feel better so that we can get on with the rest of our life, because nobody wants to kind of make a career out of fitness if we're not doing that. And nobody wants to be sidelined by pain, discomfort, and just generally feeling kind of gross in life.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about this weekend. We had a busy weekend. We had Burgers and Bands yesterday, and we had all this yard work to do on Saturday. I had some work to do. And I said to my husband, self-care is really hard.
It is hard.
I like to do yoga. I like to meditate, and I like to get a walk in. But if you start adding those all up, you go, oh my gosh, that's an hour and 45 minutes of my day.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I think as entrepreneurs, and I'm an entrepreneur myself, I own a bricks and mortars studio space. I run a business. I also have a child. So I have a lot of different pulls on my time. And I myself have experienced moments where, and when I say moments, I mean months, if not years, where it does truly feel difficult to justify that time because there's always another email to answer. There's always accounting to do. There's always cleaning to do. There's something else that feels like a priority. And we can set our body aside because we think, I don't have time to do that.
Right. Well, and you just said a word that I wanted to focus on. You said priority.
Yeah.
And we prioritize everybody. But here's what I think, I believe, and you may not know this. I don't think you've watched or listened, but I was an Ironman athlete. So my health was my priority, period, for the longest time. And now when I started this business, I let it go for a little while and I realized that's not fair. It's not fair to my business. It's not fair to my family. I actually need to make my health priority if we're going to keep going. So it's something that you saw the title of this. You are the priority.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I think that one is really difficult for a lot of people to wrap our heads around. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is because not everybody has that background where we were an Ironman athlete, which means that you loved it. So right. I always will share with people, 80% of Americans don't even have a gym membership. So that is self-evidence that the given pathway to health and fitness isn't actually desirable.
Right.
Generally speaking. And then of the people who do have those memberships, only about 20% of them actually use it. So there's a huge disconnect between the messages that we're given that say, you should do this, you need to do this, it has to be a priority, it's important, and the actual number of people who are taking advantage of that and actually moving forward with it. And the second thing is we really do struggle as adults. Even if we do love it, you just shared that you did, and you're still finding it difficult to squeeze that in.
Really.
So
encourage people to do it then. What are some of the ways that people can say, because not everybody wants to go out and go for a run, right? And not everybody wants to go out and go for a bike ride. What are some of the ways we can put exercise into our lives and maybe not make it such a chore?
That's a great question. So there's two kind of major tips I have with that. Number one, we have been told over and over and over and over and over again that the way that we execute this is in chunks of an hour. And that just doesn't have to be that way. So if we're struggling to get it in, I actually personally started after a period where I experienced exactly the kind of scenarios that I help my clients with. I broke it down into 14 minutes. I could commit to that every day. And it was largely yoga-based 14 minutes. But I knew that at 6:30 in the morning, I wasn't in a scenario where I had 100 pulls at my time. I still felt like I couldn't give an hour to it, but breaking that down, 14 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just really creating a little bucket where you can commit to it regularly. So that's number one. Number two is finding something that you do authentically like, love, or at least can tolerate. So there are thousands of different exercise techniques. And again, we've kind of been hit with a huge wave of it needs to be going to the gym, it needs to be lifting weights, or it needs to be running. I get tons of clients in who feel like some sort of grief and loss and shame that they don't like running. Running is one of 20 million ways to move the body. We can dance, we can jump around, we can play with kids, we can actually frankly go shopping because we're walking around, we can walk. There are thousands of different things that we can do. Right. And so finding something that we actually have at least some connection to enjoyment with.
Right. So I have two things to add to that. First of all, I love that you said dance. My house, you can't, so if you look on either side of us, it's wonderful. There's you can't see anybody. You look right behind us, there's a house right here. And they get to see me dance all the time. And I've lost all embarrassment about it because I'm not a great dancer, but I love to do it. So I turn on the music and I move because I love to dance. I'm a horrible dancer. So what? I'm moving, right?
Exactly. And we don't have to be good at what we're doing. In fact, most people are not great at what we're doing. I think that in our childhood were given either the label of athletic or not athletic. And like anything in life, we have the opportunity to develop that skill set. We might not ever even improve, but the goal is not to get recruited by Cirque du Soleil or to become a competitive athlete. It's to just do something that we love, even if we're terrible at it.
Right, exactly. And then my second one is a tip, and it has been a lifesaver for me during COVID. We're spending a lot of time like this, right? We're spending a lot of time in front of the screen. So I do one of two things. I've scheduled a few minutes between each call, and I go out. I have a little, it's like we moved into a new neighborhood. It's the coolest thing. There's a half-mile loop, and it is completely natural. Yeah. So I go out, I walk my half-mile loop, I come back, and that's it, right? Yeah. And maybe I do that several times, or better yet, I will schedule, instead of a Zoom call, a telephone call and say, hey, why don't we walk while we're talking?
Exactly.
That has been a lifesaver for me.
Exactly. I actually did some very rough math because there was some information coming out kind of somewhere a few months ago about what our collective step data looked like. And what it really showed was that people who were already exercising actually increased their step volume. So folks who were already prioritizing this looked at the saved commute time, looked at the saved time for meetings or what have you, and actually exercised more. The rest of us went the other way.
Oh, no.
Yes. And so what I actually started quickly calculating was we all have 24 hours in a day. If we sleep for 8, that takes us down to 16. Right. And if that set of people weren't even hitting the 10,000 steps, which, we're going to be generous and say that's going to take an hour and a half of your day, that leaves 14 and a half hours for people to sit down. We're not standing. We're not moving during that 14 and a half hours a day. And so I started talking to people a lot about being sedentary. And most of us deny that we're sedentary because it becomes this comparative set of, well, compared to someone else or compared to what I think in my head. But when we really start doing that math, and I do encourage everybody to do that math. Are you sedentary for 12 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 14 hours a day? And can you actually reduce that?
Right.
To your point, I do the same thing, actually. I don't, sometimes I do go out and do an hour and a half of exercise at one time, but I'm more likely to, immediately after I talk to you, go outside for a few minutes. I have the same sort of, there's a couple of different pathways that I'll just do a little tromp around. And I'll do that 3 or 4 times a day as a little break. That means that I'm not sedentary for 6 hours a time. It means that I'm actually not sedentary for 14 hours a day. But none of those little windows add up to an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Right. Well, and I want to go back to that. You just said that. So to 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps, even when I'm out there, is a lot. Even if I'm going for a walk, it ends up, I'm like, oh, criminies, how did I not get 10,000 steps today? So it's sometimes a lot. And I have 3 children, and my last one believes he's not an athlete. He's 100% sure he's not an athlete. And so we have a hard time getting him to exercise. And so I finally said to him, sweetie, I don't care if you do 10,000 steps. I don't care if you do 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's go with me for 15. We'll go for 15 minutes. It's better than nothing. And I want people to remember that part. I think it's better than nothing. Which you said you did 14 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, do that.
Yes. I think that we can get very trapped into counting minutes and steps and metrics. When you look at children moving around, kids aren't looking at their Fitbits. Kids aren't looking at the clock. Kids aren't measuring calories or output or measuring their oxygen. They're moving their bodies and they're doing it with joy. And that's really what I want to bring back to adults. The issue for most adults is that we are told, starting at about age 35, that aging feels a certain way in our body. So many adults feel terrible in our bodies. We have pain in our bodies. We have aches and pains and just things that feel gross. And we think in our heads, well, that's just aging. Right. And it's really from sitting. It's years and years of sitting, and we don't see a pathway out. I talk to my clients about how we're never going to build that pyramid of fitness on top of pain and discomfort. Yeah. So when we're starting in this hole where it feels painful just to move, and I've had this in my own body. A few years ago, I fell. I was physically burned out from working and parenting. I was ill, etc. It didn't feel good to go for a walk. That didn't actually feel good in my body.
Right.
And so then we don't even see a pathway out of this. How do we actually build fitness when it feels uncomfortable just to go for a walk, when our back hurts?
Right. Well, and we talked about pain and distraction.
Yes.
I have a lower back. As a matter of fact, I'm going for a massage tonight. So that's self-care today. But I'm going for a massage tonight because being in pain, I'm sitting here talking to you, and it is something that's on my mind. It's right now. I'm like, that hurts.
Yeah.
So it is something. So how do we get past that? What do we do?
That's a great question. Before I answer it, I just want to mention that for entrepreneurs, those words that are on our screen right now are the reason that we want to actually start to take action. Because as entrepreneurs, we do not have time to lose, we do not have money to lose, and we cannot be distracted by things outside of productivity. So again, if we're looking for a way to be more efficient at work, it's actually going to be through preventative measures to keep us out of pain. I look at a lot of my clients, most of them will tell me they've gone to a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, massage therapist. That stuff all takes as much, if not more time than preventative measures. Right. So the number one thing I start all of my clients with, because again, they're coming to me saying, I'm getting old, things are hurting, I have low back pain, I'm seeing a massage therapist. Those are all great disciplines, but we need a way to actually be able to self-manage that. So I teach my clients a technique called Yamuna body rolling. I also teach them yin yoga. I teach them Pilates. And these all fit in the category of body sustainability. So we're not even at the point where we're exercising. We are sustaining our body. I talk about this like a car. When we buy a car, we know that we're going to have to do some basic maintenance. Every 6 months or so, we have to take that car for an oil change. Every week or so, we have to put fuel in the car. At least a couple times a year, we have to wash the car. We know all of these things, and we can go through every belonging in our home, including our home, and we know the same thing. We're going to have to do maintenance on the home, the car, and other belongings. We never think about that with our own bodies. We think about fitness and being fit, but we don't think about we have to keep those aches and pains at bay. We have to keep the whole system in a state of sustainability. So sustainability isn't about counting minutes. It's not about counting calories. We're not, in most of those techniques, we're not really burning a lot of calories or accumulating steps. But what we are doing is keeping our joints mobile. We're keeping our fascia moving. We're keeping that fundamental tissue hydration so that we don't end up breaking down.
Right. And one of the things I do want to admit, the yoga thing, I did it for a long time. And then I was like, I'm walking, I'm riding, I'm doing all this stuff. So whatever. And I started yoga again. And oh my God, I came out after my first time. I said to my husband, I wonder how many people don't know how tight they are, because I had no idea how tight I was until I tried to do downward dog. And I couldn't. And I've always been able to put my heels on the ground, and I couldn't. I was like, what is that?
And when it comes to stuff like that, we actually do tend to deprioritize that underneath our more classic quote unquote strength and flexibility and cardio conditioning. So the flexibility and that body sustainability piece is always seen as less important. And I would argue, particularly for entrepreneurs, particularly for people who don't have a strong passion towards that strength, cardio, and other fitness elements, this is where you want to actually spend your focus, because that's what's going to keep you in a place where you're not distracted from pain, sitting at your desk, thinking about your back, thinking about your neck, thinking about your shoulders, etc.
I bet I've had 5 clients in the past 6 months who have missed weeks of work for back pain.
Yeah.
6 clients who have called me, 5 or 6 clients who have called me and said, hey, I'm going to miss this week because I can't get out of bed because I have my back. Yeah.
That's right. And it's something that honestly we don't tend to think about until it does become fundamentally debilitating. But I have seen so many clients whose version of what debilitating is far beyond the threshold, where it literally is pain that's filling our brain's receptors, filling our body's receptors. And there is no possibility that we can be productive and that we can really accomplish our goals in life when our brain is half filled with pain and distraction. And when we wait until it is at that crisis point where we literally can't get out of bed, we can't function to actually start addressing it.
Right. Exactly. All right. So are our bodies breaking down? We hear it all the time. We're getting old. As we get old, things are hurting more. And it does feel that way.
Yeah.
So are they breaking down really?
They aren't. What we have is something that looks like biomechanical stress on our body just by living. And so we chalk that up to aging. And I guess it's sort of semantics, but just by me being vertical, you being vertical, we have gravity pressing down on our head. And the older we get, the more of that we have had. So fundamentally, it's not necessarily aging. A lot of it is your habits. I am older by a significant measure than I used to be. I do not feel worse. I do not feel like things are breaking down, but it's because I dedicate a couple hours a week to sustaining it, to keeping those forces of compression out of my body, to stop that sense of gravity, and especially when we start to get deviated posture. So we come here and then gravity can't move through the spine as it once did. So it gets stuck in the muscles. We get that compression happening, but it's not some sort of magical thing that when you hit your 42nd birthday, it's all over and you're breaking down. So I think that we may have to exert more effort as we age to sort of stave that off. But it is a huge myth that just because the number of our age goes up, that we have to feel worse and that we should just accept that this is part of the aging process.
Right. Well, and here's my theory on this. If it is true, if we are, we can either say, oh my God, this is going to get worse from here, or we can do what you're saying and say, oh my God, I better take care of my body.
Exactly. And, I will bring it back to that car analogy. If we have a 5 to 10-year-old vehicle, yeah, that maybe it does need a little bit more maintenance than the one that's a year or two old. But we know that, and we put that in to the vehicle. So It's the same thing. We don't just give up and say, well, it's, it's going to be a beater now. So, but somehow we do that with our body because we say, well, this is aging. And then we make jokes about it and we post memes about it, but nowhere in there are we taking responsibility for, it's just like having an 8-year-old car. You know that you're going to have to put a little bit more money into that and a little bit more time into that. So actually accepting that this is part of our responsibility as we age will keep you from breaking down.
Well, and as an entrepreneur, maybe we need to stop thinking that it's selfish. I'm trying to come up with a nice way of saying this, but instead think I have a responsibility to my employees. I have a responsibility to my family. And so it's my responsibility to take care of this body that's taking care of everybody else.
What's interesting is as we age, I think we have a lot more emotional wisdom. We have a lot more wisdom in our brain that we can draw from. So certain things become much easier. Let's take those pieces that are easier and translate it into the things that become a little bit harder. So when we're younger, our bodies tend to be invincible, but we have no idea what's going on emotionally. We can't manage teams. We have a lot of professional skills to learn. That increases as we age. And maybe we do have to take some of that resource that our body's giving back to us on a cognitive level and put it into our physical body.
Absolutely. I love that. That's a really good thought. I mean, now I've got to stop and think about that a little bit. All right. Well, let's talk about how we create a sustainable body. What are you, let's do it from two standards. Let's do it from first, the people who have not exercised at all, who are going, no, I've never exercised. It's really not my thing.
Yeah.
And then let's go to the ones who did, but then started a business and are going, I don't have time for that. So let's focus on if we can.
Yeah. So the folks who did exercise or maybe currently are, and I do get lots of those clients in as well. What I'm going to do is encourage you to add in a sustainability practice. That could be Pilates, that could be Yamuna body rolling, that could be a yoga practice, something where you are doing that for the purpose of maintaining what you have. And that often does come, again, we culturally brand that as a flexibility practice, but it's something where you're decompressing your joints and you are taking the pressure and strain of emotional, cognitive, and physical stress out of your body. And the amount that you're going to have to do that very much depends on what sorts of pressures you have in your life and how your body responds to those. So that's an easier category, but I think it may mean that we shift away from that thinking that we had in maybe our 20s or even our 30s of it's an hour of cardio, an hour of weights, and we're going to take and some of that time and just reallocate it into sustainability practices.
Yeah.
For the folks who have no exercise practice and or are already in pain, this is the only area where you're going to focus. So I have clients who do nothing but those sustainability practices that I have shared. And the other thing that I actually do recommend to almost everybody is walking. Our bodies were meant to do that. At the very least, you have to get off your ass. So whether you've got a Fitbit on, whether, whatever it is, you've got to stand up. You've got to just get some movement in. But you need those underlying sustainability practices. And I generally suggest that the wheelhouse for people who are numbers oriented is about 2 hours a week. So we're going to have to do about 2 hours a week of basic movement that's going to help your body actually make advances.
Right. Well, and I like that too. That's sustainable. 2 hours a week.
Yes.
Really, you've got that.
Yeah.
And it's easy enough to do a little bit at a time. One of the things I was just thinking as you were thinking that we were talking about this is that Wednesday we're going to talk about mental health, and mental health is health, right?
It is.
And the reason I started thinking about, what you were saying with that is that you said walk. And one of the things I know is that my best ideas come when I'm walking.
Yeah.
My best conversations come when I'm walking. And I'm going to give this as a mom who has raised 3 teenagers. Walking with your teenager is the very best thing you can do because they're beside you. They're not looking eye to eye.
Right.
They'll tell you things you never imagined they would tell you.
Yes.
So
I loved your idea also of doing business meetings while walking. I generally recommend for that set who doesn't enjoy exercise, and there are a lot of folks out there who don't, is that we do something called temptation bundling. And it means that we're taking something we do enjoy and we are spending our time doing and bundling it with something that we're not as excited about. So that for a lot of people is podcasts. It could be talking on the phone. It could be doing business meetings, but all of those things could actually, with the help of our friends' earbuds, could actually very easily move to walking. And very much to your point, also family time, bonding with kids. I do that with my son as well.
Right. Yeah, it is amazing how, I would be lying if I didn't tell you I loved exercise. I mean, if I didn't say that, I'd be lying. I love it. And I get so much out of it. And quite honestly, I could leave this house today and go for a bike ride and not come back until way late in the day and go, oh crap, I still haven't done work. But
Yeah.
I do get that there are times, because there have been a lot of times in my life that I'm like, I can't prioritize that. I'm busy.
That's right.
So I do understand that we don't do that. And I love, when I saw your talking points, as you said, sustainable body, I thought, oh my God, yes, that's what we all need.
We don't spend enough time talking about that because I think there are folks like you who love exercising, but there are many more folks who don't. And the word fitness is something that we often will even tune out. So I know that I have done other podcasts and they've actually specifically asked me not to talk to entrepreneurs about fitness because people who love it will tune in. People who don't actually actively tune out. I don't actually even use that word in my studio because the goal for 99% of people has nothing to do with fitness. It honestly rarely even relates to aesthetics. It is, I have things I want to do in my life. I have hobbies, I have family, and I have things that I want to accomplish at work.
Right.
I've got to get rid of this pain. I've got to make it so my body can actually function. And at the end of it, that's what most of us want. And so we need to be in a position where we can sustain that, forget the rest of it, because if you hate it, you're not going to do it.
Right.
If you fall in love with it, bonus, but we really just need to find that wheelhouse where we can sustain the whole operation.
Right. I want to go back. You said you talked about the things you want to do in life, and I'm going to make a confession that nobody on the show knows, but we had the most amazing opportunity at the end of 2019. Our family was invited to go. We run a charity for suicide prevention, and we were invited to bring that charity to New Zealand.
Oh, cool.
It was great. But about 3 weeks before we were supposed to leave, we were trying to get our house ready for sale. So I was up and down on a ladder trying to paint every single room in the house. And about a week and a half before we left, and we were going to be hiking and biking and whitewater rafting and zip lining and all this amazing adventurous stuff in New Zealand, I went to get in the car and I couldn't do it because my back was bad. It was very bad. And I really thought I was going to mess up our entire trip. And that was one of those moments that I went, oh no, this is really important. I've got to take care of this so that I can do those things.
Yes. I've had so many clients who tell me that their priorities and their goals are to garden, to play with grandkids, to get off an airplane and not be embarrassed in front of colleagues. These are not lofty goals. People are not saying, I want to run a marathon. They're not saying, I want to be able to do adventure sports. They're not saying, I want to get recruited by the Cirque du Soleil or be on the cover of Yoga Journal. These are, I shouldn't say simple, but they are life goals that almost all of us can relate to.
Absolutely.
And I love your story about going on vacation, because that's something I enjoy too. I love being able to go on vacation and try a new sport or activity. It adds so much to my vacation. Sometimes I'm absolutely horrible at them, but that's a separate issue.
Let's do it. And simply, if you think about, that was an adventurous thing, but if I wanted to go to France and I want to walk around, if you go to France, if you go to Paris, it's a big city. And most of what you're going to want to see is walking around. And
exactly.
Because you're not healthy.
Exactly.
How disappointing is that going to be for you?
So just imagine being as confident in your body and your body's capabilities and abilities as you are in your professional life. And I think that in your professional life, many entrepreneurs are reading books. We're doing things like watching this video. We're taking those moments of our life to really build our skills and advance our professional capabilities. It takes time. It takes effort. Our bodies are actually no different. And that's kind of a moment where I have to parent people through some of it. We have to take responsibility for this. For most people, it landed easily in our laps in our teens and our 20s. But once we're past that, just like your professional life, if you've invested 30 minutes watching this podcast right now, that's 30 minutes investing in your professional life. We have to do the same thing for our body. It might be 5 minutes here. It might be 30 minutes there. But that confidence in our capability to walk around and to dress the way we want to and to exercise our hobbies and to be really amazing at our job all has the fundamental base of our pyramid as sustainable body.
That's awesome. So I'm going to put this out there. If you're listening to this, many people are watching it right now because we're live. But if you're listening to this on the podcast, leave us a comment at wherever you're listening and let us know, first of all, what you think of the show, but also, were you walking when you listened to it? Were you doing some sort of movement while you were listening to it? I'd be really interested to know how many people are doing that. I know that's what I do when I listen to my podcast, right?
That's how I consume all of my podcasts as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So tell people how they can find you.
Well, on the screen, you can see my business name. It's 3 separate words, My Body Couture. So you can go to the .com. I'm also on all of the other social media platforms. So you can find me at Facebook under My Body Couture. You can find me on Twitter under My Body Couture. You can find me on Instagram under My Body Couture. I also write for Elephant Journal. That's under my personal name, which is Janis Isaman. I'm on LinkedIn under my personal name, and I have a YouTube channel under my personal name where this video will be posted.
That's awesome. I'm going to say something just because I learned it Saturday. This is, and actually I think you'll appreciate this too. If you are using hashtags on anything, actually anything, make sure you use Camelback. I'm saying this because we're using Camelback on the screen. It says my with a capital M, body with a capital B, and couture with a capital C. The reason is that when they use, people who are visually impaired, when they use the screen reader, it won't read it unless you do that. It won't read it unless you do that. Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's a really simple thing to help people who are visibly impaired to be able to enjoy your podcast or enjoy the text that you're putting out there. So they also said don't use a whole lot of hashtags. I'm not hashtags, a whole lot of emojis.
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise, when it reads them out, it reads exactly what the emoji is. That's just annoying. Time to hear that.
Laughing with tears coming down face takes a while to read that.
That was I thought that was a really neat little thing I learned. If you don't take anything else away, take that little bit away because you'll help other people. But please take away to take care of your body. All right, Janis, I'm going to be right back to you. Give me 1 second. I want to remind everybody that Wednesdays we're going to talk about mental health as health. It is important. If you take care of your health, think about what you eat. If you're exercising, also please think about your mental health. It is so important. It's such a big part of who we are. And it's such a big problem right now for so many people. So do that. I want to remind you to subscribe on YouTube. Again, because my kids think I'm a nerd, but quite honestly, subscribe on YouTube because we want to get this message out to so many people. And we can't do that unless we have at least 1,000 subscribers. YouTube just doesn't even show people as much with us out there. And a reminder to go to burgersandbands.org or follow us anywhere as burgersandbands.org. We really appreciate that. So I want to go back, Janis, there you are. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right, guys, I will see you Wednesday. Bye-bye.